This Voice of San Diego podcast is brought to you by our new sponsor, Manolatos Nelson Murphy Advertising and Public Relations. It's San Diego's newest communications firm. NMM is run by Tony Manolatos, Bob Nelson, and Kelly Murphy Lampkin, who bring decades of advertising and public relations experience to the practice. M&M creates connections and drives results, offering strategic planning, media relations, online, print, and broadcast advertising, coalition building, and crisis communications. Our reporters at Voice of San Diego have definitely heard a lot from Tony and Bob over the years. Tony, Bob, and Kelly are supporters of Voice of San Diego, and you can learn more about their new firm at mnmadpr.com. That's mnmadpr.com.
This podcast is sponsored in part by a new podcast called Flip the Script, The Future is Female. The podcast aims to shake things up and offer a new vision for how to move San Diego forward. Hosts Ismahan Abdullahi of Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans and Nicole Kapritz of the Climate Action Campaign will be in conversation with cutting-edge thought leaders and agents of change who will share their ideas for how we can make San Diego into a region that is inclusive, progressive, and equitable. The goal of the podcast is to help inform, discuss, and inspire more San Diegans to get involved and help create a better future where everyone has the opportunity to achieve their dreams. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or visit www.flipthescriptsd.org.
Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast, where we make sense of local politics, schools, housing, public safety, the civic issues that impact the life of a San Diego resident. We break it down so you can understand it and make educated decisions.
Everything that goes into our investigative reporting, the journalists, public records requests, the data crunching, and this very show depends on the support of people like you because we're a nonprofit news organization. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and thank you to everybody who's listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. I am Andrew Keatts, and I'm joined here with my very good friend, Kinsee Morlan.
What's up?
How we doing, buddy?
Doing great, man.
Scott is on vacation. He's in Utah this week, but we've got a packed show nonetheless. We're going to do a few things. First of all, we've got, for the main portion of the show, we've got two folks from Turista Libre. It's a tour guide company that operates out of Tijuana, to talk to us a little bit about the pretty serious tensions going on with yellow cab taxis at the border in Tijuana and some of the physical confrontations they've been getting into, and give us the history of that situation and set the stage for what to expect from it. In the second half of the show, if you're listening on the radio and you want to hear the full show, check us out on podcast. The full interview I'll do after the fact with Monica Montgomery. She's running for city council against council president Myrtle Cole. We talk about her background and her campaign and what she would hope to do in the office. But before all that, Kinsee, we've got big news. This is a major announcement.
That's right.
You've been putting your heart and soul into this new thing, and it's live. It's happened. What is it? What do we have?
We have dropped the first episode of I Made It in San Diego. It's Voice of San Diego's new podcast about the stories behind the region's businesses, big, small, really sit down with the people in these in-depth interviews and try to drill into the moments of struggle and perseverance and humanity and how these people have done what they've done.
Yeah. And one of the things I really like about it is that while these are big and small and an esoteric collection of different businesses, they're all people who have achieved a modicum of success. Right. So you get a real satisfying narrative arc, as opposed to somebody who's just got a neat idea and at the front, and who knows if maybe it'll work or not.
These people have made it.
Yes.
Yep. So we're going to play a clip from the show and probably drop in a full episode later this week to the main feed so y'all can get a good listen. And in this clip, Greg Deering of Deering Banjo Company, I talked to Greg and his wife Janet, who built their business from a garage in Spring Valley to a large factory in Spring Valley. They're now the biggest manufacturer of banjos in the country. So here's Greg talking about how that all got started. The Deering's success was driven by the family's belief that they make the best banjos in the business. That stubborn confidence has been key because from the moment Greg made his first banjo, people told him he should just give it up. But Greg says he knows good craftsmanship when he sees it, which is why he kept at it. Greg learned how to make things by hand from his father, From a very young age, his dad had him building model airplanes and other things, and he wasn't shy about telling Greg when he was doing shoddy work.
And it was like very intense, but I never felt pushed. It was a passion. I was eager. I was soaking it all up. I devoured every piece of it. So I was like in seventh heaven all the years I was growing up. And my dad pushed pretty hard, and he would say things to me sometimes like, I know you don't want to hear this, but I really did want to hear it. So it was good. So he gave me a foundation of craftsmanship. He was a master craftsman, aircraft engineer. So I grew up around airplanes and building flying models. And I had the foundation when I decided I wanted to build banjos.
Okay, it's a fantastic show. Make sure you download it. I Made It in San Diego. Rate and review on iTunes. But getting back to this show, Kinsey, why are we talking about yellow cabs today?
So there's a Tijuana taxi cab turf war going on. And, Uber has disrupted all of public transportation across the world. But in Tijuana, there's something really interesting going on and kind of scary. So Derrik and Alejandro are here to tell us what it's like to live and see that every day. So we're here in the gorgeous Voice of San Diego podcast studio with Derrik Chinn. He is the founder and CEO of Turista Libre. It's a tour company based in Tijuana and now in Mexico City. We're also here with Alejandro Torres, Turista Libre guide who grew up in Tijuana. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Gracias.
And, I used to live in Tijuana, and I was so close to the border. My view was of a sea of yellow and white cabs. And I think most people who traditionally have walked into Tijuana remember the same thing. So can you talk to us just a little bit about what people see right when they walk through the border, or they used to see?
Well, the typical welcome wagon that is waiting for you just on the other side of the San Isidro and Otay Mesa border crossing is a herd, essentially, of yellow cabs. And in recent years, even before you get to the actual cars themselves, the drivers are standing right there through the sidewalks as you're exiting the customs facility. And of course, the typical protocol is taxi, taxi, taxi. You guys want a taxi? Where you going? Where you going? Of course, this is all depending on how you look, right? Mm-hmm. But for the typical tourist, it's pretty obvious for the tourist stands out. So of course you Rosarito, Ensenada, Revolucion. You guys want to go to this strip club, that strip club, and it's stressful.
It's overwhelming, right?
It's very much
overwhelming. Yeah.
The scene that I've kind of developed over the years of crossing on foot and with tour groups is that scene from Finding Nemo. With the pelicans and mine. And it's the only thing that keeps me with a smile on my face, and also keeping me from their bullies. They are very much, this bullying force. So I think of those birds.
And there's a word actually for that business. It's called jalador, which is like pulling you, to do something or go there. The jalador is basically a profession in the Tijuana, among the Tijuana people, because basically it's part of the tourism, right? So every time you go to a country, that's full with a lot of interesting things to do, you have people who are like trying to pull you, to their own business. So it's called jalador. So for them, it's like a profession,
Yes, yeah, and that's not to be messed with, right? You don't mess with someone's job.
And it's been like this forever since you were a child.
Yes, actually, this is a very interesting story. It's the taxis amarillos, the yellow cabs. They got their permission. In the late 50s, I think. The government of Tijuana. There was not much of control there. Actually, Derrik, you were talking about this morning about how Baja California became a state very recently.
Yeah, it was in 1952 that the Baja California became a state.
Okay.
So this is a very, very new system altogether, We're still getting our feet on the ground. So, yeah.
So in the 50s, the Tijuana government gave the yellow cabs permission, to basically monopolize the border.
Right.
So since then, we have them, as the one and only taxi company.
But so the one and only, but then I remember from my time there that there were the yellow cabs and then there were the white cabs. And from the very start, people told me, don't take the yellow cabs. They'll charge you double. Always take the white cabs. And so I would fight my way through the sea of yellows to try to get a white. But even then, I didn't have always a great experience with them either, because Some would charge me a normal rate, and others would see that I was a gringa and charge me the gringa rate. So what's this other company that's at the border?
Well, you're mentioning the Taxi Libres, which, so when the yellow cabs opened in the 50s, when they first started in the 50s, Tijuana was a very, very small town. And basically over the span of a couple decades, it just blew up into what is one of the largest cities in the whole country and the largest border city by far. So over the years, as more and more demand is there, more cab companies and more groups, more unions have started popping up. And you're talking about the Taxi Libres. These days, they're white and orange. You also see them white and green as well. Yeah.
And there's a story behind them. So you have to know something. There's a lot of corruption in Mexico.
Okay.
So
What?
maybe
What? Oops. What?
You're gonna believe
I've
that.
never
You're
heard
gonna
that
believe that.
before.
Yeah, sadly it's true. And Tijuana is the first city that you see when you cross the border from California, but for Mexicans, it's basically the last one. So it's the corner of the country. So there's a lot of shady things happening there, right? But we don't get to see them because it's a bursting border. So there's a lot of things happening. You don't get to see it right away. But there is a lot of corruption. So these white yellow cabs taxis, they're recently new, right? They're not so old. Maybe they have like 15 years around or 20 years around. They were basically illicit business of a former mayor of Tijuana. Right? So he
Jorge? Hank?
No, it was
Aw.
Jesus, like
Okay.
Jesus, Jesus. Yeah. So Jesus Gonzalez was this mayor's name.
Okay,
And
so he edged his business
exactly.
in there. Of course.
The I don't know how you how you call the permission. Basically, it costs like $4,000 to have one.
A permit or something.
permit or
For
something,
the
yeah.
license plates, right?
For the license plates,
For the
yeah.
license plates to operate the unit. Not for the car itself, just for the tags
Yes,
to
for the
operate at the
tags.
permit. Yeah, the operational tags.
So that's the story of the infamous
And so
white.
the yellow cabs are politically powerful. They are a force in local elections, but they also
They
are.
used to be.
They used to be. Okay, so
Not
tell us
anymore.
a little bit about that.
So I don't know, Derrik. You were talking about, because I left Tijuana 2 years ago. So now Derrik's more into the political scene over there. But you told me that the mayor, the actual mayor, is fighting the yellow cabs, right? Which they represent the PRI, which is a political party in
The
Mexico.
yellow tags were aligned with PRI.
Yeah,
Right.
and the white ones and the mayor who's right now in power, they represent the PAN, which is
PAN.
The
The more right of the two.
Got it.
Of the two major parties. It's all very political. And the thing with the cabs is they were historically aligned with the PRI, but we have a new bus system in Tijuana that was also a big threat to taxi cab drivers and other bus drivers around the city. So basically, a lot of folks are saying that the new mayor, which is a panista, he's from the PAN, was elected basically because he promised all the other cab drivers and bus drivers that if he were elected, he would basically dismantle this brand new bus system that cost them $60 million to install. They built the whole infrastructure, and then there was such a controversy among the existing system of transportation operators that they basically just kind of like backed him. So the yellow cabbies went from backing the PRI to now backing the PAN, just to kind of get their way.
And so then within the last month, this is kind of all boiled over.
Thank
And
God.
Yeah. So all right.
Yeah.
So this viral video comes out. It's pretty alarming.
Yeah.
Pretty clear. I mean, just thugs basically.
Exactly,
Just
yes.
yeah,
beat
they're
up.
thugs.
Yeah. Just beat up some tourists because they were trying to go use Uber.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
And so that sparks this big outrage, and the mayor comes out and says, we're not gonna live with this anymore. We're not gonna do this. No one's above the law. Starts trying to shut him down. Judge intervenes and says, no, you can't do that. They have permits to operate. And so that's basically the last part I had left it at. Can you help me understand how long we had been working to this point where they were getting to beating people, actually beating people coming across the border, even tourists, which, my understanding is you used to tend to be safer if you were a tourist. So to reach this pretty, cataclysmic situation, how did we get from, okay, they're a politically connected group that has kind of leeway to operate down there to where they are now?
Right. It's been years. This is happening for years. In 2012, Turista Libre has been around since 2009. And in 2012, they actually threw rocks at one of our tour buses and shattered the windshield. Not directly, but they paid someone off. There's lots of folks in the immediate border crossing that would do anything for a quick, $5-10 or whatever. So one night we had a bus full of tourists, and apparently because we had just picked up people in what was technically their area, they and this was a new thing for me back
As
in those
opposed to
days.
telling them to walk to some other area,
Right.
picking them up there.
Exactly, which is what we have to do now. We have to exit their area to basically be safe. But back in those days, this was the company was only 3 years old. We've been around since 2009. They basically paid someone off to block the bus as it was trying to get onto the freeway. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, rocks started coming at the windshield. They shattered the windshield. It was 30 people on the bus. The people in the front had shards of glass on them. And the people in the back they had no idea what was going on, but they were like, why are we stopped on the freeway, getting onto the freeway? And it was terrifying for me, because I had no idea back in those days of how much, of a mafia this is and the danger that this could bring to not just me or not just to, the other, competitors, but to civilians and to tourists. And it's frightening, it's terrifying. And so it's been building for a long time. And even in recent years, other tour companies, they've had their buses, rocks being thrown at their buses and the windshields being shattered. And now with the presence of Uber, that's brought everything to a head. Thankfully, I know it's not been a very easy or peaceful journey, but the fact that Uber's presence in the city has brought it to an international level. And now finally to the point, after Uber drivers have been tasered, one Uber driver was shot in Rosarito and later died in the hospital. It was actually his passengers who were American tourists who drove him to the hospital. They got him out of the front seat of the car and drove him to the hospital. Exactly.
But that was not that was because he was an Uber driver. They were like doing a research behind that guy, right? As far as I know.
Yeah, it seems very suspicious to me.
Yeah,
but
no, I think it was more a coincidence.
Okay, but regardless, tension between.
But it's true what Derrik's telling about that.
So Uber really started taking off in Mexico in what year?
They actually just celebrated their 3rd anniversary in Tijuana. So
Okay.
yeah, it's been 3 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you feel like the video just happened to hit at the right time and capture this growing sentiment where he just had to do something, right?
I think that this is a very complex situation over here. There's a lot of things behind what we're seeing. I think that what we see is a symptom or a lot of bad procedures regards public administration in the whole Mexico. So what happened is that a little bit of story. After the Mexican Revolution, a lot of people were like thinking what we're gonna do. So the government basically started empowering unions all around the country. So one of those unions is the public transportation unions, right? So Tijuana, again, is the last city of Mexico, the corner. So it's the last one that gets all the attention. So because of the movement of Tijuana, because it's a bursting frontier, at least for Mexicans, it's a very important border for us. So there's a lot of things that happen that you don't get to notice. You're just like, it's normal,
Right.
But the city has grown a lot in the past years. So you have I have used Tijuana public transportation since I started high school, So it has always been a problem. It has always been like the worst public transportation of all the country.
It's often just like more or less like their buses, I guess, but they seem not to be on a defined route or a schedule.
No, they don't. There's a chaos over there. And people, because, it's very easy to get a car.
Mm-hmm.
You have California, everyone has a car, So Tijuana kind of emulates that.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't really care about that. So people who use public transportation are people who live in the outskirts of the city or students, as I was. Or I don't like to drive a car, so I'm a user of public transportation. But, there's a lot of people who don't pay attention to that. So what we have right now is a symptom of a lot of things. And Uber, Uber has it's an international company.
Right.
So, there's international and foreign interests interesting there, right?
So also exposure.
And exposure.
And I think something that we haven't mentioned yet that's really important to throw into this dynamic is the fact that there are no meters in the cabs. So you have to negotiate your price with the cab driver before you get in. And sometimes that's it's a spoken agreement. And at the end of your trip, sometimes it turns out to not be, and your danger is. And so the fact that there's no meters, that you have to know where you're going, how much you're going to be charged. The fact that if you are a U.S. tourist or coming from the U.S., chances are you don't have pesos, you have dollars. The cab drivers often, will give you even, an even worse exchange rate or a worse price because they know that they can take your dollars very easily. With Uber, it's such a different story, as we all know, So that's another thing to really mention in there.
Right.
And why people are choosing
They
Uber.
can't compete with that. Yeah.
No, they have a structure. And, Mexican government is not giving a structure to these people, right? So this is why it's a symptom,
Right.
people are like, oh.
So Alex, you actually had an experience. Were you in an Uber car, or what happened to you?
No, I was here, and it's funny, right? I came to a church event here in San Diego.
Yeah.
So I was heading back to my home in Tijuana, and when I crossed the border, I basically I found a yellow cab there, and he was like, "Oh, I can take you to downtown Tijuana," which is downtown Tijuana is again what Derrik is telling you. You know, you don't know what when they say to you, "I'm gonna take you to Playas de Tijuana, to the beach." You don't know what they're talking about. You don't know if how much they're gonna charge you. You know. So basically, I was like, "Oh yeah, take me to downtown Tijuana. It's gonna be 30 pesos or something,"
which is like $3 less.
Back then, probably was. It's less definitely. Now it's about 2 or 175.
Okay.
So I was sure.
Sounds fair.
Yeah, I'm not gonna walk. I'm gonna take the cab, whatever. So basically, this guy in his mind, his idea of downtown Tijuana was basically Revolucion Street,
Mm-hmm.
And everything else, which is downtown Tijuana, for him was another neighborhood or whatever. So I told him like, would you? I'm gonna stop there, in front of that church, whatever. And he was like, oh, that's not downtown anymore. It's gonna be like 100 pesos. And I was like, no, I'm gonna get it out, And he didn't want me to. He basically kidnapped me for like 10 minutes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I had a yellow cab driver charge me and my parents $10 to go from Secut to the border, and I was like, I just gave him $5 and ran out of the.
Exactly.
I was like, no, you can't do this to me.
And that's a very intelligent, worldly thing that you did, but a lot of tourists are not that brave to do something like that, So,
no, you feel confused. Come on, It's like, what is gonna happen to me?
Right.
So, Derrik, you mentioned you actually used the word mafia to describe them. Are the organization itself, the yellow cab organization, are they involved in anything besides driving people around for money?
I think it's best for us not to talk about that here for the safety of me. If I wind up missing, you guys know where to look for me first in the trunk of a yellow cab. But they do have, this is one thing that is very obvious because they have stickers on the cars, vinyl on the back of the cars. The cab drivers have agreements with certain nightclubs, with certain strip clubs, with certain restaurants. Mm-hmm. If they bring you people, they get a cut. And so because of what we were talking about back in the beginning of the conversation about that tunnel that you have to walk through on the sidewalk and all those cab drivers, if you're a tourist that doesn't really know where you're going, you just want to go get some good food, you're going to ask your cab driver, right? For the longest time, the cab drivers in Tijuana were the original and first wave tour guides. Mm-hmm. And I think in a lot of ways, that has led to this misunderstanding of what tourism in Tijuana is really about, because they're taking you to mediocre places, to places that are not the kind of place that you should necessarily be in, I think, right. Honestly, or want to be in, mm-hmm. So of course Tijuana has this image problem because look who's promoting it, you know? So
flash forward to now, the yellow cabs are back, right?
No, not yet. They're not back yet. No, they're still, so you'll see them, but 9 of their spots were taken away. And those 9 spots are the immediate ones right at the exit of the San Isidro border. And that's where the problem happened. That's where they've always been happening is there. But if you just walk a few blocks from there, you'll see more yellow cabs. For sure.
So what do you think is going to happen? How is this going to solve itself or not, this problem?
I have no idea. And I don't think anyone in Tijuana really does because it's a place where until something actually happens, there's no telling what could happen, I mean, for now, we're hoping for the best. But personally and as a business owner who depends on this and my company has, been threatened by the way they treat people and competitors is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Mm-hmm. So for the time being, we're just kind of enjoying the peacefulness at the border, which is very nice to walk out of the customs building and to not have to be hassled by mine.
All right. Well, Derrik and Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. Muchas gracias.
Don't use yellow cabs.
This is Erin. I'm the Director of Development for Voice of San Diego. I'm here today with one of our sponsors, Tony Manilatis from Manilatis Nelson Murphy Advertising and Public Relations. Why can't a business or a government agency just rely on advertising to get their message out?
Years ago, you probably could, but the media landscape has changed so much, and so much of what people receive, Netflix, for example, there's no opportunity to advertise. So public affairs PR becomes important because it's a way to reach folks that you need to reach with your message. You can't just rely that they're going to pick up that message from radio or TV or from online advertising. If you're a water company who wants to potentially raise rates at the end of the summer, and you got to inform your consumers that if you don't conserve this summer, by the end of the summer, we're going to be forced to raise your rates. You obviously want to target them through bill inserts and online advertising, and if you have the money, radio and maybe TV. But an economical way to get those messages across is to use the media. The media is interested in what's happening with water and conservation, so they're eager to tell these stories, and the consumers, the folks you want to reach, many of them are reading newspapers or watching TV or listening to the radio. So to get involved in these these news cycles is important to get your message to the folks that you need to reach.
If you'd like to learn more about the services Tony and his partners offer, please visit their website, www.mnmadpr.com.
All right, before we get to our interview, we want to do our hero and goat of the week. First of all, our hero of the week. All right, this one goes to the County Board of Supervisors. They this week voted to approve spending just over $1 million on body cameras for San Diego County Sheriff's officers. So it's pretty clear, and I think we've written a lot at Voice of San Diego, that this is not a panacea. This doesn't solve all of our problems. There's a lot of issues that we still need to work out with body camera footage in terms of who gets access to it and what the purpose of it is. However, it's also becoming more or less standard for every major law enforcement agency in the country to have these things and to protect the officers and protect victims as well. And so I'm just glad that they did it.
Yeah, and for training purposes, right? You can look back now and see what went wrong, what went right, and build from there. And as someone, I live in Lemon Grove, and so I'm really excited that the sheriffs, we contract with the sheriffs there, and that they'll be wearing cameras. There's a lot of the areas that the sheriffs serve need this.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I think regardless of how many problems there aren't many good reasons not to have body cameras at this point.
That's true.
And our goat of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
This goes to interim DA Summer Stephan. We had her on the podcast a few weeks ago. Let's take a listen to that. But also this week we wrote, for Ashley McGlone at Voice, wrote a lengthy, in my opinion, very well done story called Everything We Know About Summer Stephan's Role in the Stephanie Crow murder case. The Stephanie Crow case was just a really notorious case in San Diego, maybe the most famous example of prosecutorial abuse in the county, and Summer Stephan was one of the prosecutors on that case. She had in the past suggested that she had much less involvement or that she was separated from some of the major decisions. Ashley goes through taking a letter written by the Crow's family suggesting that how Summer was characterizing things were not exactly true, and I think really shows beyond really any shadow of a doubt that she was very much involved in the case.
It's so simple too. To not get the goat, all you have to do is admit that you made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. So it would have been much better had Summer just come out and said, you know what? Yes, I was very much a part of this case. It went horribly awry, and I apologize. Right. Done.
Yeah, I mean,
goat.
At this point, you're listed as a prosecutor on the case. It's not going away. And so, as Ashley shows through, interviews with key players, media reports, and court records, Summer Stephan was very much involved in this case. All right, and that is it for that this week. We'll be right back with our interview with Monica Montgomery. And now I'm joined in the great Voice of San Diego podcast studio in downtown San Diego with Monica Montgomery. Monica is running for District 4 for the San Diego City Council. Monica, you work for the ACLU. What's your specific title at the ACLU right now?
My title at the ACLU is Criminal Justice Advocate.
Criminal Justice Advocate. And previously, so you've worked in a lot of different roles in the city. You've worked for city council offices. You worked actually in the city council office for Myrtle Cole, who you'll be running against next year. I guess running against this year. Yes. People will actually vote on it next year. And you also ran for this office back in 2013 when it was a very crowded field. Council President Tony Young resigned, and about 8 people ran for it. I remember it was pretty crazy.
Actually, it was 9.
9 people. Okay, I thought I was over exaggerating. Okay, so Monica, let's start off. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up, and how'd you get into this type of work?
Sure. So I grew up in District 4. Grew up in Paradise Hills, and I went to college in Atlanta, Georgia. Came back and went to law school here at California Western. I passed the bar and graduated from law school during the economic downturn. So when I went into the industry, I worked for someone who had been previously practicing as a sole practitioner. And we did a lot of work around helping everyday people save their homes from foreclosure, because at that time, a lot of people were in those dire situations of losing probably the biggest investment that they would make in their lifetime. And so
who were you doing that work with at that time?
Mr. Roy Landers.
Okay.
And then moved over to have my own office, where I continued to do some bankruptcy, other consumer law areas, and also some civil rights, employment discrimination. And then I went on, as you mentioned, I did run for office while I had my own law office, and then I started to work at City Hall shortly thereafter the race with interim mayor Todd Gloria at that time. Stayed on with the current mayor.
Wasn't much going on in the city at that time, right? It was a boring time.
Right.
No,
right.
So this was just after. So you can't tell me the timeline here. So you ran for office, would have been in the very beginning of 2013, right?
That is correct.
And then did you start for working for Todd Gloria in fall of 2013, something like that?
That is correct, September.
Okay. So what did you do for him? What type of things did you work on?
I was a community representative for District 4, and I had the...
Oh, because he was in the interim mayor's office.
Yes.
I see.
So I had the responsibility of going to community meetings in District 4, and I also worked on some policy issue areas for him. One was rezoning where food trucks would be in the city, and also during that time there was big controversy over medical marijuana. So I worked on those issues with him, with some others.
Would it be fair to say that during this time, and so then shortly after that you started working for other council offices, would it be fair to say during that time you had always intended to eventually run for office again?
Sure, eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually, but maybe not this year. At that time, I wasn't thinking I would run this year or in 2018, but eventually, sure.
And so then you moved into Council Member Cole's office.
Yes.
Now Council President Cole.
Yes.
So what did you do in that office?
So around the same types of issues, public safety issues. I staffed our small business improvement district organization. Also worked on youth development issues in her office, and also attended community meetings.
Yeah. And so let's just jump right into this. It's interesting. You're running against somebody you used to work for.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel like, presumably you must not be thinking that she's doing a great job if you're running against her. Was that something that you picked up on during your time working for her? What was it that made you decide to challenge your ex-boss?
It was a hard decision to make. I do believe in my community, and I believe that the representation needs to reflect the diversity, the richness, the culture of my community where I grew up, the community that raised me. I just want to give everything back to that community. So even though this was a tough decision, and I don't consider it to be personal per se, it's something that I feel that I have to do.
So, what is it that you think that you could do as the council member in that district that Councilmember Cole isn't doing adequately?
I believe that my experience as an attorney and being trained that way would help provide an expertise toward the type of decisions that need to be made at City Hall. A lot of it has to do, of course, as you know, with the municipal code, with contracts. And I think that my vision for a policy-driven office will really elevate the residents of District 4.
Yeah. So when you were in the office, did you think that she was not representing the community as well as she could?
Well, when I was in the office, I went to the office to be on the grassroots level for my community. I went to be on the ground floor and to try to help in whatever way I could. And I believe that I did that. And so one of my main pieces of my platform is police reform.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. I know that that's very important for the residents of my community. And I think that we can move forward in police reform. And I think that police reform will benefit the residents of District 4 and police officers in the city of San Diego.
So there's been a number of issues in that general world related to criminal justice, police reform that have been really, major headline issues in the city lately. And especially in that district. What specifically would you like to see done? What you say a big part of your platform is police reform. What types of things would you actually propose?
Well, there are a lot of things, but some have already been presented to the city.
Yeah.
So the racial profiling report that was done by San Diego State University, that included recommendations for more transparency in the department, more data collection in the department, and more engagement with community. I would support those recommendations, and the current council, with the exception of 2 council members, did not support it. And I think since then, 2 other council members have sort of come out and said that they do support police reform as well. And so I'm looking forward to working with those 4 council members. But those are the types of things that I would be pushing.
Yeah. So what do you think the issue is between if there is an issue between the police department and the city council as the body that oversees city staff, including the police department? I mean, the police department answers directly to the mayor, but the city council sets policy. So what is it that the city council has failed to do in the last few years or the last few decades to produce the sort of relationship between the community and the police that you envision?
I think it's a fine line, right? Because I think most residents respect police officers and the hard work that police officers do. I think it's easy to get trapped into the narrative that if you question a policy or a procedure of the police department, that you're against police, and that is not the case. It doesn't have to be the case, and I think the more we talk about this issue and bring it up in intelligent ways that people can understand, it will become more normal. It's become a new normal to differentiate or provide a distinction between not appreciating police officers as opposed to just demanding that policies such as de-escalation policies and such are put in place.
Yeah, I think that issue was really on display during the racial profiling study, which I think was maybe as much as possible was framed in a non-combative light. I mean, the study itself took a very long time. They were, from my perspective, pretty appreciative of the concerns for the department, and yet it still didn't go anywhere and was still seemed to be received in some way as if it was an attack on individual police officers. Do you have any sort of insight, just, as doing what you do for the ACLU, do you have any sort of insight about how that conversation can become more productive in general?
Yeah, and I do want to just point out that during that time, there were two council members, Councilmember Georgette Gomez and Councilmember David Alvarez, that voted against the motion, which was to not include the recommendations.
Right.
And since then, Councilmember Ward has reached out to his community and done some outreach around police reform, and Councilmember Bree has also been vocal about supporting police reform. So I just want to set that context. But I really think that it's important that the districts that are most affected by police bias and racial profiling take the lead on these types of issues. And so I think that maybe that gap is the one that's missing and needs to be filled. And I would be willing to do that as a council member and looking forward to it, actually.
So that being the case, that districts that feel the brunt of these issues the most should be the ones that take the lead. Why is it, do you think, that out of the 5 Democrats on the city council, the one that you're running against is the only one who has not either voted in one way or made some public statements about supporting these reform initiatives?
What I can do is speak to what I will do.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to my ties to the community. I can speak to the fact that I have an ear to the ground on these issues, and that I will put community first and I will lead on those issues.
What's your relationship like with the police union or the police department in general, either in your work at the ACLU or in running for office? I mean, certainly these are sorts of collaborative issues, and as we've discussed, it can become very much a headbutting situation. So what is your working relationship like with the union or other entities that might push back on the sorts of initiatives that you'd like, or don't always like the way the topic is framed? You know, they don't necessarily. I think what I often hear from officers is that the discussion is framed in such a way that they're being forced to apologize for doing work that they feel like they have no choice but to do, and that people aren't understanding just how difficult their job is. So I wonder, as somebody who's involved in these conversations so often, you know, how do you weed through that?
Sure. I had the pleasure, actually, of working with the Police Officers Association when I worked at the city for the 3 different elected officials that I worked for. And I think that having a mutual respect and knowing what the union representatives stand for and knowing what I stand for is a good start, actually. I think that the Police Officers Association does their job in representing police officers. I will do my job in representing District 4 residents. And we may not agree on everything, but I'm really looking forward to working with the Police Officers Association and advocating for the needs of my community.
And so what are some other primary initiatives that you would take up in the city council? I always, you know, when I talk to people, I try to explain that the mark that a city council person makes often isn't really how you vote, because so many of the votes are uncontroversial. Everybody votes the same way. I think like over 90% of votes are unanimous. Those types of things that kind of work their way out, where council members kind of separate themselves is more where they spearhead something, what they decide to prioritize. So aside from police reform, what would be some other issues that you would try to carry?
Sure. We are in grave need for economic opportunity in District 4. I think poverty is it spearheads a lot of these other issues that we speak of when we talk about underserved communities. I don't really like to use that term, but it is what it is, right? And the numbers show us that District 4 is underserved traditionally. I'm looking to change that, and one of the good ways to change that is through providing more economic opportunity for residents. And so I say when the district benefits, the city benefits. So I want to incentivize industries to come to District 4 and build upon, the land that we have available, that is balanced development and not skewed one way or the other. So that is
in terms of the types of income levels for housing that's built and that sort of thing.
Yes,
I know, like right now, a lot there are projects happening, but they're almost, if not entirely, they're close to entirely low income housing.
That is correct, and there is a need. There's a need for affordable housing in the city. We welcome that, but we also will welcome retail. We also will welcome businesses. We also will welcome office buildings. We also will welcome arts and culture facilities. There is a lot of possibility for District 4, and it doesn't all have to be one thing.
I find it, so the first time I covered development issues in District 4 was like 4 or 5 years ago. And as I was getting up to speed, I was reading a bunch of the previous articles that had been written on the issue. And it was like they were so similar to the article I was writing then. It was like 4 years earlier. It was like a different reporter went in and taught the same thing. And I was just editing a story that we're publishing later this week. It's like 3 years later. It's like very similar story again. It's like there's always a tour bus going to come through to try to show people development opportunities for potential business expansions. And there's always a new program that's hoping to attract, business incentives in some way. And I wonder, what is it that you think that prevents, for one reason or another, District 4 from ever just catching on and just really changing the dynamic entirely? I mean, like the retail study about how much money in the district leaves the district when people spend was done in 2006, and it's still cited. It's still like as relevant today as it was back then. Same thing with like the need for healthy food options.
Sure.
And it's like these issues just aren't changing, and I don't live there, you do, but I imagine it just must be so frustrating to hear these same conversations go over the same territory and not really change much.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. The time is now.
Mm-hmm.
We need new leadership. We need a policy-driven office, because that is where a lot of the changes will come from. Understanding the scope of development. Not just accepting what is handed over, but understanding the assets that are alive in our district, in our community, and taking advantage of that.
What do you count as those assets? What are the things that you would emphasize as the...
First of all, the people.
Yeah.
The sense of community, the culture, the talent, the land.
I mean,
the proximity to downtown. There are so many things about our community that have not been highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so excited to highlight those things. And as we highlight those things, we will attract more businesses, And so I agree with you. It has been extremely frustrating, but the time is now. Mm-hmm. We're ready.
Do you sense things changing? Do you, like on the ground, do you sense that there's a slow burn and that development is coming, or that there seems to be different economic conditions bubbling up?
I sense that my community is ready, and I would just take this time also to say that we have, when I say we have talent and expertise right there in the community, we have many that had a vision for our community before we were even born, or before I was even born,
mm-hmm.
And so there's that richness of culture there, and there has been a lot that has been contributed to District 4 through our previous bold leadership. And so I want to continue in that legacy and fulfill many of the desires that our leadership has had.
How do you feel? So Jacobs Foundation, obviously a major player in the district. Civic San Diego has itself really tried to assert itself as a development player in the district. What's your relationship like with those two organizations, and how do you feel they'd be able to be a part of what you're talking about?
I am looking forward to building and strengthening those relationships as a council member.
Mm-hmm.
That is always a different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
I as far as Jacobs is concerned, long history in the community with a great vision of wanting to include community in the development of the district. I'm looking forward to coming to the table to make sure that that vision still exists. I know that the Voice of San Diego in particular has reported on Jacobs being in debt and not totally sure with what is going to happen to the land that is there as far as if it's going to be sold or they will keep it and develop it on their own. But I'm happy to talk about those things. Very crucial in the development of District 4 as to what our community will look like, who will take ownership of it, and who will build it.
And then what about Civic as a player in the district?
Yeah, Civic has a lot of issues right now that are affecting its ability to move forward with the development projects.
Its own financial picture and lawsuits and that sort of thing?
That is correct, yeah. So we'll see. Same idea.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see the viability of Civic and what they can bring to the table for District 4.
So you mentioned a couple times wanting to have a real policy-driven office. I don't want to imply too much, but it seems you seem to be suggesting that Cole's office right now is not policy-driven. Is that fair?
Let me say this. There are quite a few people in the office that I've actually worked with. That is a very talented office. We talk about the differences, though. And I'd like to reiterate that this is the way that I think. So it's the way that I will lead. I, am an attorney by trade, and that just naturally I've been trained to look at things in that light. And I really think that the district will benefit from that.
Yeah. So, I wanted to make sure we mostly talked about the policy, but the politics here, it's going to be a challenge, I think, right? She's council president. She's been able over the years to get a fair amount of support from folks like the Chamber of Commerce and the mayor's office. She's, aligned herself with them at different times. Recently, she's been able to kind of mend some fences with unions and came together with them to block a special election recently, and sort of seems like maybe the Democrats on the city council are more unified than they have been in the last couple years. So now you're running against an incumbent city council president who's kind of, got some friends in high places. What's your outlook like on how likely this challenge is for you?
It's an uphill battle, and I'm ready. You just mentioned many interests that are outside of my community that often don't hold a seat at the table for my community, and that's who I'm running for. I'm happy to work with those who are outside of the community as long as it benefits my community. And again, the time is now. Hard decision. This is how necessary I feel that it is. In spite of everything that you just mentioned, I am really excited and ready to move forward in this campaign.
We'll leave it at that. Monica Montgomery, candidate for City Council District 4. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Andrew.
Hey, Kinsey here with a short sponsored interview brought to you by Downtown San Diego Partnership. Keith Jones is the managing principal and partner at Ace Parking, a company that's grown from a small San Diego family business into one of the nation's premier parking companies. So Keith, you take a lot of pride in being based here in San Diego.
As being a fourth-generation San Diegan, third-generation business owner, I'm grateful to be part of the fabric of the community. We have over 2,300 different employees and team members that we employ within the county of San Diego, and I look at my job as being of service to both my team members and my employees and the customers that hire us and park with us. So I look at every day of how I can be a servant leader for both my organization and both the city that I get to call home.
And you take customer service seriously. I have heard you've been known to answer client emails at 3 a.m.
I believe strongly that if you're going to be a privately run organization that you take pride in and that you live and breathe, then it's a 24/7 business. And so the type of emails or correspondence that I'm responding to are everything from a customer asking about, how do I engage with this type of parking facility in terms of making a reservation? Or I was always taught by my grandfather, and I think this was a Navy thing, that, hey, no matter, even if it's 6:30 on a Friday evening and a client calls or emails you, you need to respond that evening. It's not okay for it to wait to the next day or later, because they're trusting you. They're trusting to work with you. And so that's just another core value that I believe runs true, and I think is part of that San Diego mentality about both being a community mind base, but showing our true might of being living on the international stage.
So Keith, speaking of being community minded, what sort of social programs or issues is your company most interested in?
Well, being from San Diego and having a business of the size and scope of Ace Parking, I believe strongly that great corporations make an impact in the communities they do business in. And so one of the things that touched my family, as it's touched so many within not just the Ace Parking community, but San Diego and the global community, is cancer. And so after an experience that my family had with cancer and working through that, we at Ace Parking created an initiative that every October we actually turn our blue signs around town pink, and we call it our Park for Pink campaign. And each October we take a good portion of our parking proceeds and then partner with various community organizations to both help financially and promote their good doing through our Park for Pink campaign. So last year we connected with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, LLS of San Diego, and partnered there with both Scripps Hospital the year before. And in 2017, it looks like we're going to partner with Pedal for the Cause, Padres Pedal for the Cause.
And your office is close by. It's downtown here in San Diego, and you've always been located downtown. And obviously, parking lots are part of the urban design. So what do you think makes a vibrant, exciting downtown?
One of the reasons that Ace Parking has called downtown San Diego its corporate headquarters for almost 70 years is that we believe strongly that great cities, great counties, great communities have strong, vibrant downtowns. And in order to be part of a strong, vibrant downtown and parlay that into a strong, vibrant business, you need to have boots on the ground and be part of that and activating that downtown. And so us being downtown and integrating in with the community with which our customers are, I think gives us a strong understanding and advantage of what our customers and consumers want out of us. I believe great communities and great downtowns are activated. They find different ways to activate based upon the time of day, whether it be a Monday through Friday morning, more business ritual, to an evening time of, a consumer coming down and enjoying different experiences, or whether they be in our market, a consumer trade show and how the downtown community shows. It's evident that we have a homeless epidemic going on. And so instead of turning my blind eye and saying, well, it's time get my team members and employees into a safer environment, let's move out of downtown, I'm actually saying, how can we double down? How can we be involved in this? And how can we help a neighbor helping neighbor and be part of a solution? And so while the community and everyone's talking about affordable housing solutions, that is awesome and is needed, but the fact of the matter, if you're homeless and you're destitute, you don't even have money for affordable housing. And so how are we changing that conversation to say, how do we triage the situation so that we can get people off of the streets and into emergency shelters, so you can have both that approach as well as the approach of affordable housing? And so I believe of being a San Diego-based company and having the opportunity to be part of the community, then it's my responsibility to be part of a leader in the community and help understand and build solutions towards solving these problems together with the various factions that can have real-world impacts.
The Downtown San Diego Partnership is a leading advocate for the economic vitality and growth of downtown San Diego. The Downtown Partnership's many members are committed to creating a vital and vibrant urban center that benefits the entire San Diego region. Visit downtownsandiego.org for more information on its programs, or call 619-234-0201 to learn about the many benefits of becoming a member.
Today's show was produced by me, Andrew Keatts, and Scott Lewis. It was recorded by Adam Greenfield in the Great Voice of San Diego podcast studio, where we also produce Good Schools for All and Kinsee Morlan's Culture Cast. Thank you to our partners at Kogo 600.
The Voice of San Diego Podcast Network is a product of Voice of San Diego, a nonprofit news organization. Search iTunes for Voice of San Diego Podcast Network to subscribe to all of the shows we produce.